to Room 237 as I continue to go through films by A24 that I have or ones that are available to me, Hulu or Netflix. And this is actually one I checked out shortly before Christmas. I checked it out on Hulu, then immediately went out and bought it because I had to have it. I love this movie. And this is actually the A24 film that made me want to seek out more films by A24. Now, I had already seen, obviously, Lighthouse, The Witch, It Comes at Night, also Hereditary and Midsummer. And I knew I liked A24, but after seeing this one, I was like, all right, this is a company that I really support. They really the epitome of what I look for in modern horror. This is the movie that made me want to do that. And since I saw this, I saw Killing of a Sacred Deer, which I loved. A Ghost Story, which is not a horror film, but it's very good. And this has got to be one of my favorite A24 films. If it's not my top 3, it's the top 5. And it's 2019's Saint Maud. Wow. Now, I had heard some things about this. Like, I had heard about its Rotten Tomato score, which I think is like 90-something. Yeah, I was just hearing some really positive things about it. 92 on Rotten Tomatoes. And it's just been getting crazy reviews. So I checked it out on Hulu, and I just had to go get it. And watching it, I don't think you would believe that this is actually a debut film for writer-director Rose Glass. I mean, this is everything you can expect from A24. I mean, yeah, it's a slow burn. It's very straightforward as far as its narrative, very limited as far as its characters, or its cast, rather. It does have things that you can look into as far as themes and symbolism, if any, but the cinematography, the atmosphere, the performances, just everything is just top-notch. I guess it would fit under that category of elevated horror, which I know a lot of people don't like. I do have a playlist of those kinds of films. But, yeah, this movie is excellent. I absolutely loved it. So, and for a debut, to not only be what you could expect from A24, but be one of the better examples, that's quite a feat. Rose Glass is going to be a director to watch out for. Now, it stars, if I pronounce this correctly, Morfydd Clark. She's the one that plays our Saint Maud, along with Jennifer Ale, if I pronounce that correctly, whose mother is actually Aunt May from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. And that's pretty much it. That's our core cast. Those are our main characters. But you have appearances by Lily Knight, Lily Fraser, Turlo Convery, Marcus Hutton, and Carl Prekop. Now, the score was done by Adam Janata Bizowski, and the score is very much, it reminded me a lot of like The Witch or The Lighthouse. It's basically just tones and sound effects to create this very eerie, dreadful atmosphere. And just to kind of make comparisons to other films, take the character of Carrie, the kind of character study of Taxi Driver, and kind of put that together in like an A24 film with the sort of obsession and delusion being religion, salvation. Maud is this very lonely girl who is traumatized by a past experience that were given in the opening of the film and then expanded upon later. Which, another thing about this movie is that it has the right amount of ambiguity and the right amount of, I don't want to say exposition because it's not like an exposition dump, but we get just enough of what we need. And without spoiling the ending, this is another, it's actually a lot like Censor. If you like Censor, you'll like Saint Maud, because it is this very very intimate, almost voyeuristic look into the life of this woman. As it does kind of follow her in her job, like Taxi Driver, like Censor, but it builds up. It has the same kind of punctuated ending that is like a gut punch. That's like a frame long, and if you take that frame out, it kind of undoes everything. Because some people have talked about the ending and tried to interpret it differently. I'm partial that what you see is what you get, because it also has a very unreliable narrator type feel, because it is all, we do see it all through Maud's perspective. There's never a scene with other characters talking when she's not there. Everything we see about the world and everything in it is through her perspective, not POV, but so yeah, it opens up. She was a nurse. She failed to save a patient during CPR. It's not a spoiler, but we find out later that she cracked their chest. They died. And the first thing she sees after this event is a cockroach, and she looks up at it. And I think the cockroach is supposed to symbolize God, because the cockroach scene does show up a couple times, but there's also a scene where she's talking to God, and it happens to be from a cockroach. But she's now a private carer for a Jennifer Ailes character who's named Amanda, who's kind of lives like a movie star. I don't know if she's like a socialite or what, but she's this rich woman who's dying of cancer, and Maud is kind of becoming obsessed with saving her soul. Now, when I first heard about this film, I knew it was like a psychological horror film about this very religious girl who becomes obsessed with saving her patient. I thought it was going to be more like, say, a Misery or something, which thankfully it wasn't. I mean, I love that movie, but that movie works for that movie. I'm glad it went this route. But it also deals with, Maud is very, I guess we find out her real name's actually Katie, but changed it to Maud, I guess, after her transformation, which, it's kind of hinted that she had this downward spiral after the patient died. She was wayward, she was lost, and then she found God, felt the presence of God, and put her on this path. But she's very, she's traumatized, she's very unstable, very lonely, almost no human interaction, no friends, and it's kind of this blend of, this perfect storm of PTSD, mental illness, loneliness, and religion. But it does it in a very tasteful way. It's not in your face. It's not trying to make this, you know, uh, anti anti-religion statement. Like, uh, I can't see this route or a movie like this going that route, trying to say how religion can mess people up and turn people into mod and how that's bad. It's not trying to take the themes of the Bible or God or religion and trying to reinterpret it in a clever way, in a very pretentious way, like uh, uh, Darren Aronofsky's Mother. Not like that at all. It's this really straightforward story of this messed up girl, messed up, lonely girl who, because of her loneliness and because of her mental illness, her religion is becoming more of a delusion, and she's really going down that spiral, and it becomes an obsession. Also, trying to prove her faith, I guess, to kill the guilt for killing the patient. It just happens to be very, very, very well made, well executed, well acted, well everything. I mean, Clark's performance as Maud, along with the score, the cinematography, the atmosphere, the buildup of the tension, is all just spot on. I mean, this is, even though A24, what I've seen for the most part, are top quality films, this is top quality of the top quality. I mean, this is up there with The Witch. I would have to say The Witch, The Lighthouse, and this would be my top three. And so yeah, she wants to save, and she takes everything very literally. Like, Amanda gives her a book of paintings by William Blake, and just writes in it like, for Maud, my savior, love Amanda. And she doesn't read it as like a term of endearment. She reads it like she believes that Amanda believes that she's her savior, because she talks to her about the touch of God when they're having tea one day. And the thing about Maud is, I think it also points out some sort of sexual repression. Maybe she had a bit of a spurt when she was going through her downward spiral, which she does again at one point in this film. But whenever she prays, she seems to go into some sort of orgasmic ecstasy, or appear to have an orgasm. It cuts very quick after. But Amanda also has a female prostitute lover that, because of the homosexuality and the prostitution, Maud feels that Amanda's soul is in jeopardy, so she intervenes. And we see that when things don't quite go well, like she harms herself, we see that she has cuts on her stomach. When she gets mad at Amanda's prostitute friend, she burns her hand on a stove. Eventually, she tells the friend, stop coming around. And then during a birthday party, in front of all the guests, Amanda mocks Maud for trying to save her soul. Maud punches her in front of everyone. She gets fired. I don't know if she gets fired from the agency, but she loses the job of Amanda. And she feels that God's not giving her enough signs, or maybe he put her on the wrong path, or maybe she was foolish for believing him. So she goes on another spiral. Goes to a bar, just starts drinking, gives one guy a hand job, goes home with another guy. There is the character of Joy, who maybe she's supposed to represent something, represent good, because she's this friend, I'm guessing from nursing school or the previous nursing job, who sees her and wants to gives her number, wants to reconnect, be her friend, check in on her. But Maud, as the movie goes on, just becomes more and more disconnected from everyone and just more involved with her mission, her delusion. And even when she's having sex with the guy that she brings home or goes home with, like she's on top, and when she's pushing down, she has the image of the patient dying. And yeah, it's a pretty kind of, I don't know what the word I want to use is, not bleak, but not rough, but it is kind of a depressing sit, because after she has that like moment, she's scared, she lays there, and the guy still just tries to have sex with her. She just lays there and takes it. But then she goes home, and she's begging for forgiveness and to not be led astray again. Then there's these fireworks. She has an epileptic seizure, and that's when we get this scene. So, and that's another thing. There's not a whole lot of supernatural stuff like this. You would think a movie with religious tones would have a lot of sort of supernatural kind of weirdness to it, not this straightforward, grounded type film. But anytime something like this happens, it can be explained. Like, she's having an epileptic seizure. This is probably just how she sees herself or how she feels, because she has that sort of orgasmic reaction again after. I'm assuming she felt it was the touch of God again. And that's when she's given her final mission that's going to turn her into a saint. And yeah, it is a slow burn film, which I like those anyway. But I mean, it felt really, really short. It's only 84 minutes. And story-wise, yeah, it's just traumatized girl, very religious, becomes a private home caregiver for a cancer patient, becomes obsessed with her salvation, saving her soul, goes a little too far, gets fired, has a downward spiral, this sort of crisis of faith or an existential crisis, finds herself again, her faith comes back even stronger and even more delusional, she becomes even more disconnected, and it leads her down this very dark path. And you kind of get like the Taxi Driver type climax, which is the most I'll go into it before spoilers. But, and yeah, I can see people not liking this because it is slow, because there are no jump scares, because it is ambiguous where it needs to be. It doesn't spend a lot of time on backstory or details or whether things she's seeing and hearing and feeling is real. Like, is everything that's like supernatural stuff, is it real? Is it in her head? Is it a delusion? That's all straightforward. I mean, at least with the end. I mean, the very ending, the very last frame can undo all of that. That very last frame really signifies what it all is, which I'll save that for spoilers. But, I mean, if you like the kinds of movies that A24 or even IFC puts out, definitely check this movie out. This movie was... since it came out in 2019, I can say it's among my favorite of the 2010s. Definitely a top 5. I mean, it would be up there with The Witch, The Lighthouse. What else was my favorite of that last decade? I did make a list, but I'll have to go back to it. But even movies since 2010, this is one of the best, or one of my favorites, horror-wise anyway. Maybe even beyond horror. But Yeah, also, if you're a fan of just those kind of character study films, like Taxi Driver, then definitely, definitely check it out. If you're a fan of Censor, definitely check it out. I mean, the whole thing is, every aspect is top quality. Again, performances, score, the cinematography, the way it builds its tension, the way its atmosphere, the perfect amount of ambiguity and fact. It's not overboard with certain things. Like once she gets her faith back, and she starts cutting out pictures of all these saints and Jesus out of the Blake book, and puts tacks in them, puts them in her shoes. So it's like these holy pictures are puncturing her feet. She's bleeding on them. Which earlier she harms her hand. So I guess you could look at it as she has the same wounds as Christ, which also the breaking of the chest, which is where Jesus was stabbed. And there's other things that I'm sure if you look for it, you'll find it. Like there's several shots of like when she's washing her bloody hands, you see the blood in the water go down. The whole thing about Jesus bleeding blood and water. But so yeah, there's a lot you can look into it theme-wise, but it actually is pretty grounded and straightforward, which I really admire. And I'll have to save that for spoilers as well, but yeah, I loved this movie. Absolutely loved it. Can't recommend it enough. And yeah, with that, I'm gonna get into spoilers. So after her epileptic seizure, she sees another cockroach crawling on the ceiling, and it crawls down to this little shrine that she has for God, Jesus, the Bible. And we get this great scene with this, assumingly coming from the cockroach. That's what I took from it. This very deep, disembodied voice in Welsh, telling her how proud he is of her, how far she's come, her faith, what he has left for her to do. And it's this great shot of just like her standing like this, just kind of like looking up at it. I love the sound of the voice. It's got like this Doug Bradley Pinhead type sound. And again, I think at this point in the film, it is part of that. This is where it really starts to, because it's right after this scene, where you can start to think, well, is there something happening to her, or is her delusion just really gone off at this point? Because also throughout the film, she has inner monologues where at first I thought it was diary entries where she's talking to God, asking him questions. So her, which it might actually be before that, when Maud goes to talk to Amanda's new caregiver. Sort of in private, not telling her who she is, but she goes to talk to her, and even when the new caregiver's like, oh yeah, we're great friends, we get along great, you can just see the look on Maud's face, like, but yeah, that was a good scene. Goes and talks to her, but like that woman kind of has this view of, yeah, it's great to form relationships with them, but they're gonna die, then you move on. Like, I think Maud's sort of upset that she doesn't try to save them or do anything. And I think it is after the cockroach scene where she starts like using the tacks and stuff like that. We even see her like, there's shots of her like walking really slow because it hurts, but like her excuse me, her face is, you know, almost like she's in ecstasy. So she makes this sort of makeshift robe out of a bed sheet and rosary beads, gets some holy water, and she goes to Amanda's home after the caregiver leaves and tries to bless her. But every time she goes to put the water, Amanda fights her back and even tells her, like, you're the loneliest girl I've ever seen. And I love this scene for Morfydd Clark, because you see her go, just the confidence and the happiness of, you know, she's very confident in this mission and her faith. She's like, I'm not alone. God is here. And just the way Amanda just takes that away from her and she just breaks down is excellent. It's great acting. You know, it says, you're the loneliest girl I've ever seen. Snap out of it. He's not real. Which, and it doesn't really come out and say if she is an atheist or if it's, you know, if God is real, then why am I dying of cancer? It just has the opposite belief, which is all we need. Saying, there's no one in this room but you and I. He's not real. Nothing you do matters. And then we get, now this is a scene where because this is the second time I've seen it. Every time it pops up, I'm just like, I mean, it looks cool, but like in the moment, it kind of makes me think of a movie like, say, The Last Exorcism. Just a really, or like Devil Inside, or just a real shitty modern like possession movie. Cause Amanda like sits up and has like the Deborah Logan mouth and starts, you know, had in this weird position on the bed. And it starts to mock her faith and her mission. And it's saying it's pathetic. You have to prove your faith. You know, if you really were a believer, you wouldn't be here. And yeah, she does kind of look demonic, but they don't go crazy with the makeup. Maud snaps, grabs some scissors, and stabs Amanda a bunch of times. Now, I don't think that was real. I think that was in her head, just like the whole movie. And again, I think the very last frame, that the punctuation to the whole movie proves that. I love the scene when she leaves, because it's kind of like this, I guess you would call it I don't know if it's a tracking shot or a dolly shot, but like she's walking away from the house and the camera's following her, and she's just kind of, it almost has like a GoPro look to it, which makes it kind of voyeuristic and neat looking, and how she's just like enthralled, and she's got Amanda's blood on her. She goes home and washes it off, and then well, there is another scene before that when she's getting everything ready, like when she's getting the sheet ready and the holy water. That woman Joy comes by again, but Maud is so disconnected. She's just staring out of the window while Joy's trying to tell her, you know, what happened with the patient wasn't your fault. We all should have supported you. We know you were lost and lonely. Which I think is trying to say that, you know, a little human interaction and kindness and help can, you know, maybe not cure a mentally ill, a delusional mind, but can certainly aid it. Can certainly be what it needs and be important. But she rushes her out the door. So then we get the scene with Amanda. The next morning, when she wakes up, she's got these, you know, and these are decent optical effects too. Obviously CGI, but like they're transparent, kind of faint, but like glowing light, angel wings that she can see. And she walks down to the beach, and this is the end of the movie. Just up close of her, we just see her dump this container of acetone all over her, and we hear the muffled, distant voices. You know, like, someone stop! Like, hurry! Someone stop her! Someone stop her! Hey, stop! Which, you know, gives it more atmosphere because there's no audio. Like, it feels like the audio is cut out, except for those background voices of people trying to yell to her and stop her. And she just puts her arm out, and we just see the and slow motion. She goes up in flames, and we go back and forth between up close of her with the angel wings. It's got more like heavenly flames, and she's in ecstasy, and you know the clouds are like opening up like a portal to heaven. The beach of onlookers that were like rushing to stop her, then fall to their knees to bow and, you know, worship. And then for like a frame, just like 1 second, oh, and the music's all heavenly sounding, but then for 1 second, it just cuts to burning, screaming, in pure agony, dying Maud to show the reality of it. So like Censor, it shows what the character is seeing and feeling and what they believe is to be going on, but then we just get that little touch of reality. And yeah, some people have said that the devil, I think some people have said that the devil's been possessing, sort of leading her down this path the whole time, that the devil came in during the cockroach scene, that the devil did possess Amanda and then possessed Maud after she killed her, and that all the supernatural stuff did happen. I really do think that that last second before the credits shows that no, this is just a mentally ill, delusional, lonely person, that, you know, all of it was exacerbated by her, I guess you call it blind faith, because I think she was desperate for answers and to kill her own guilt. So yeah, I think everything like this, and like the possessions and the wings and everyone, you know, worshiping her, was all a delusion. Plus, the movie is, the narrative is told solely through her perspective. So it would make sense that the only sort of disconnected look we get is that one little shot of reality. And just like in Censor, that's all we needed. We didn't need like a minute and a half of her dying. We didn't need like 5 minutes of her burning, then dying, then people talking about it, then finding out what happened later, like in a newspaper or on the news. No. I know people want that. just long enough to see what it is, you know, realize it, recognize it, put it together, then cut. Far more effective, way more of a gut punch. And just like Censor, it, you know, two of the best endings of horror films in I don't even know how long. Probably my two favorite endings, at least since 2010. Just, you have this perfectly serene scene, and just keep putting that punctuation of reality in there. And it's the most horrific part, the most effective. And that 1 little second answers pretty much every question that you could have about the movie. So that's Saint Maud. And yeah, I absolutely love it. And yet, this, how simple this cover is how simple the movie is. And I mean, there are enough breadcrumbs in the film that you can look into the more specific religious symbolism and themes and try to point at how it fits and everything, but goddamn, the masterfully made film, absolutely brilliant. Not only is it, sort of a typical or good A24 film, but it's one of the best ones. And yeah, definitely top 3 or top 5 favorite horror movie since 2010. Certainly between 10 and 19, but even from 10 to present. If it's not in the top 3, it's certainly a top 5. Top 3 A24 film. Everything about this movie works. And like I've said this before for other movies, I think when talking about A24, everything about it, Pig. It wasn't A24, it was Pig. Where everything about the movie is very limited. You have one main character, 2 recurring characters, or 3 supporting recurring characters. But like the cast, the score, which is basically just tones and sound effects, the sets, you're either at Amanda's house, Maud's apartment, or the various kind of locations where she walks around. Everything is very limited and quaint and small, except for its effectiveness, which is gigantic. This is a very effective and powerful movie. It has that perfect punctuation at the very end. It's an exclamation point. Because this is also the kind of movie that people want to interpret and talk about and say why their interpretation is more correct than yours. But I really think that final shot of her burning really concretes fact of everything. It's all in her head, all a delusion. And yeah, it could also be seen as a cautionary tale for people with mental illness, or people who are lonely, or people who are lost in life. I'll say this happens to everybody that's like that, but yeah, I absolutely love this movie. I would go so far as to call it brilliant. I don't know why that was so hard to spit out. I would go as far as to call it brilliant, and yeah, because of this movie, A24 is now my favorite, like, newer modern film company, and made me want to seek out more films intentionally, not just finding, oh hey, that's A24, I'll check that out. But yeah. So I guess after the 2 A24 films by Robert Eggers, yes, I know The Northman's coming out, but it's not horror, it's not A24. I'll still check it out. After the 2 Robert Eggers films, it's got to be Saint Maud. Then either Killing of a Sacred Deer or It Comes at Night. Then maybe Hereditary. I'm not sure. I've got a few. Like, I really want to see Lamb. I really want to see Climax. I've got a lot more to get to, but this is definitely one of the best. I'm just going to keep repeating myself, but I can't praise this movie enough. I loved Saint Maud. But yeah, I think I'm starting to lose my voice. So thank you for watching.